Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a discussion about Iran's unprecedented missile and drone attack against Israel, how cooperation between Israeli, U.S., and other partner air defenses were able to thwart that attack, and the potential for Israel to respond soon. I'm Ari Chukral, Jinsa's Assistant Director of Foreign Policy. I'm honored to be joined by retired IDF Major General Amikam Norkin, a Jinsa Distinguished Fellow and former commander of the Israeli Air Force, and Jinsa's Randy and Charles Wax Senior Fellow John Hanna. As always, you can find the latest information and analysis that Jinsa has produced at jinsa.org. I welcome listeners to use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask any questions for General Norkin and John. General Norkin, I'll start with you by asking you, what was your overall response to Iran's attack and how Israel, the United States, and other partners were able to defend against it? And more directly, there have been claims that Iran's attack was more of an attempt at signaling than an effort to cause damage in Israel. I would ask you how you assess those claims.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm honored to speak in front of this audience. I already recognize some of my friends from the American Air Force, so welcome. I will start like I learned from my friends from the American Air Force by the bluff method, bottom line up front. We never, ever deal with such a scenario all around the globe. At the same time, the Iranian launched 110 ballistic missiles and 285 cruise missiles and drones to the state of Israel. And from those drones and cruise missiles entered to the airspace of Israel or across the Israeli border, and 99% from the missiles been intercepted. We practice ourselves with our allies, of course, with the American Air Force, with the American military, by the Jennifer Cobra exercise through the last 20 years. And of course, with our friends from AFCENT, Air Force CENTCOM, and our friends from the Air Forces around us. And we practice those scenarios, but I think that the Iranian attack was almost the difficult one that we plan to deal with. First of all, you need to prepare your force where to put the radars, because the main challenge for this threat is to detect the missiles and the cruise missiles. Once you detect them, once you find them, you can intercept them. So you need all the assets, satellites, ground radars, aerial radars, and others to be part of the same net and to find all the threats. So the bottom line is it's all about the net, because we need to put all our assets in the same net and to find those threats and to share the information between the air defense systems and our combat fleet around the border of Israel. And of course, with our friends that can fly over other nations, and some of them intercept those cruise missiles and UAVs all around the eastern nations between Iran and Israel. From time to time, people ask me, well, it's easiest to intercept a drone than to intercept a MiG or a Sukhoi. But I think that it's much harder. It's harder to find them. They are flying low altitude. at night, very small airplanes or very small platforms, low speed, small engines. So to find them, it's much harder. Then you need to do the right maneuver for a low altitude and low speed platform, and to use the right air-to-air missile against those targets, and to use the right platform. It's might be F-16 or F-15 or F-35 against each of those threats. And all of that is, let's say, happen at the same time over the Red Sea, and from the corner between Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel at the south part of the border to the northern part of the border until the border of Lebanon. At the end, I think that the Air Force did a very good job, and we defend the state of Israel. The Iranians declared that they want to destroy our F-35 base. They want to destroy the F-35 squadron, and they failed. And you know that the distance between Iran and Israel, it's more than 1,500 kilometers. So the only card that the Iranian got is the ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles and the drones, and of course the cyber domain. So they use their best card, and they fail. And I think that the fact that the American government decided to build those capabilities, the Arrow 2, Arrow 3 with Israel together, I think now we can, let's say, debrief this decision, and we can say loud and clear that was the right decision, and now we can defend our nation and our forces and our citizens from those threats from Iran. There are many lessons to learn, but the most important one, of course, you need the right assets and the right technology. The most important one is from my perspective, if you are not preparing yourself in Friday, you won't eat lunch in Saturday. So we prepare ourselves to those scenarios, and unfortunately, some of the Western nations still don't understand that they need to build the force and to start to prepare themselves for such a scenario in different fronts around the world.
Thank you for that overview. Certainly appreciate an overview on that, and touched on a number of topics that I want to dig into. But as a follow-up, you mentioned the Arrow air defense system. The Arrow has had previous interceptions. I think first exo-atmospheric interception was actually in November with the Houthis, but this was its first real major test against a massive bombardment. So how would you assess that it fared? And then, as you mentioned, all of the interceptions that took place were outside of Israeli territory, and all of those, none of the cruise missiles and drones got through, while some of, unfortunately, some of the ballistic missiles got through. So what can we learn based on that and the challenges between intercepting drones, cruise missiles versus ballistic missiles?
So may I offer to look at a short video clip that we prepared for this webinar about the interceptions that we did against the drone and the cruise missiles. And Ethan, if I may, from time to time, I will ask you to pause the video and I will speak about the picture that we are seeing. So before we are going to start the video, what I would like to brief you is that we are looking at the camera of the pod, IR camera, infrared, and usually the pilot, the F-15 or the F-16 can slave this pod to the radar. So once the pilot is locked on the target, the pod is looking at the target, the same pixel, and the target usually supposed to be at the middle of the cross. From time to time, the white is hot, and from time to time, black is hot. It can be chosen by the pilot. For example, now we are looking at darker at the white hot. Usually, the hot part of the target is the engine. So let's look at some of those intercepts. You can see the land because they are flying low altitude. So the pilots need to fly low altitude at night, which is a very, let's say, challenge mission for them. Please.
דרום מזרחית זה נכון, זה 100 של חזרה מהכיוון מערב.
אלפא תחליטי למעלה.
2 שיגר. יש פגיעה. יש פגיעה מ2, המטרה הופלה. לא נפלה. 4 שיגר על המטרה המזרחית ביותר. הטיל הראשון. 1, 2 לוקח תגור 9.
Start pause. So now we can see clearly the Iranian Shahid. This is the Iranian Shahid. In this picture, the black part is hot. As you see, the airplane is much hotter than the ground, so is colored black. You can see the unique platform, Iranian unique platform. And those platforms can fly thousands of kilometers. So the threat is not just for Israel. And we also, this platform also been launched from Russia to Ukraine. Because the Iranian forces, as we all know, already published, support the Russians with those platforms. Play.
2, 3, 1 אני ממליץ יש פגיעה.
Pause. Now we are looking at the cruise missile. The cruise missile is also black hot, fly much faster, around 300 knots, low altitude. The engine is bigger, hotter, and the way that the pilot need to act once he understand that there is such a target, it's a little bit different scenario for the pilot at night. Play, please.
יצא לאחורי מיד דיווח, יש תוצאה הולך לבצע רשאי, זה חיובי ביצעתי.
Thank you, Ethan. So as you all can understand, more than 200 UAVs and drones intercepted by the Israeli Air Force, all of them by the combat fleet. Of course, the Iron Dome and the David Sling can intercept those targets, but we didn't want them to enter to Israel and then the ground system can intercept them. So we intercept them before they enter to the Israeli airspace, which is much better in such a scenario. Now let's talk about the ballistic missile. As Ari mentioned, we already intercept some targets from Yemen that been launched by the Houthis. But the main different and much more difficult mission for us in this specific night is the fact that the Iranians launch the missiles almost all together. So it's a very, first of all, not from the technology perspective, to detect for the radars and to build situation awareness on space. Those missiles climb to the level of hundreds of kilometers. They are flying to space and then back down to the state of Israel. And the radars and the satellites need to understand where each of them, there are many. And once you start to intercept the first missiles, all the debris cover the skies. Many pieces of metal. So you need to, like in a surgery, to understand what target it's a part of debris or what target it's a ballistic missile that you still need to intercept. And this is a challenge that we are used to have when we are intercepting rockets with Iron Dome. But now for the Arrow unit, it was the first time that some enemy nation launched such an amount of ballistic missile toward Israel. And I think that they did very well in a very professional, let's say, method. And as we all know, they defend the state of Israel.
Thank you. That was great overview on the different air defenses and fascinating video to watch all those different types of intercepts and seeing the very characteristic Shahed drone going down. I want to bring in John into the conversation and turn to you for any initial thoughts that you have about Iran's attack, Israel's defense, but also any thoughts you have on the U.S. role in defending and helping to defend Israel and what that signals to our partners as well as our adversaries.
Well, thank you, Ari. Listen, the first thing I want to say is just, what an honor it is to fly shotgun for General Norkin here. I got to pinch myself to believe that we've got, a hero like this that's part of JINSA that we get to talk to on a regular basis. So the first thing I think people need to know is that this unbelievable successful defense that we witnessed over Saturday night, that this man has a huge amount to do with this. This is the man who had a huge part in building today's Israeli Air Force that was responsible for the defense of Israel on Saturday night, and what I think must have been one of the greatest single barrages of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones ever fired in the history of warfare at a country. And what we saw on display in terms of just the skill of these pilots and air defense operators and the technological prowess is just absolutely extraordinary. This really is one of the best, if not the best, air defense forces in the world. The other thing I'd say about General Norkin is that just what an absolutely critical role he played in building, to the extent that the alliance, the Air Defense Alliance that the United States under CENTCOM has tried to build for many years, but really accelerated over the past several years with Israel's incorporation into CENTCOM. Israel, a country that for the vast majority of its history, its theme song has been, we're going to defend ourselves by ourselves, just give us the capability. The idea of fighting in any way, shape, or form as part of a coalition, and to some extent, putting your security at some level and your trust in the hands of others to help you and assist you and serve as a force multiplier for you doesn't necessarily come naturally to Israel, but people like General Norkin, who saw the possibilities in what the United States and CENTCOM were trying to build and understood the kinds of benefits it might bring in the future to Israel. It was sort of that visionary kind of leadership that, again, to the extent that that alliance or that burgeoning alliance had a role on Saturday night to kind of bolster Israel's dominant participation and help Israel, I think General Norkin has a huge amount to do with it. So it's really great and an honor to be with him. What I would say is, there's good news and bad news. I think, on the one hand, again, what Israel did on Saturday night, particularly the systems that it built, that it spent the last however many, years building, at least since the development of Iron Dome, and then on to David's Sling, and then on to the various versions of the Arrow. So much of that is been done in cooperation with the United States. That this is that both countries deserve an enormous amount of credit here for being on the really outer boundaries of technological prowess and modern warfare. And it's that partnership and that investment that the American people have made in Israel, in our joint strategic partnership, that made possible what we saw, this miracle that we saw happen on Saturday night. And I hope people realize that, and the American taxpayer looks at that our ability to assist and help over the course of years and years of investment and working with our best partner in the Middle East, this is why we do it. This was the payoff. Because God forbid what would have happened if Israel wasn't ready, as General Norkin said, if we hadn't invested like we have and trained as we have and had that kind of foresight for future threats that we needed. Who knows what could have happened on Saturday night, and then where the world would be. So this was an enormous achievement that America participated in, that I think any of our other partners or allies around the world, they look at that, what the United States and Israel were able to do together, and they say, I want some of that. I want to be part of that team and that club. And I think that's incredibly important. Let me just quickly, in terms of the actual lead up to this, what happened on Saturday, it's no surprise to anybody. We in the lead up, we had weeks of tensions between the United States and Israel over the Gaza operations. I don't put it beyond the Iranians and their proxies that they could have badly misread that tension as being something more than a tactical difference over how to complete the defeat of Hamas. And they may have mistook it for a strategic development that maybe they could push the envelope and take advantage of the situation in the way that they attempted to do on Saturday. So I think that is something that together the United States and Israel need to look at and figure out how we make sure we're not sending those kinds of signals. If we're sending those signals, that we don't do it again. Second thing I'd say, though, in the days once April 1st happened, in the subsequent 2 weeks, I think the president once again reverted to his October 7th gut reaction and was exactly right in his tone in saying, okay, we've had our differences, but in terms of the defense of Israel against a terrorist state like the Iranians who are orchestrating all of this violence in the Middle East, we're going to be there for Israel. And they went to work. They obviously repositioned military assets. They sent the commander of CENTCOM to Israel to be there to undertake this kind of joint planning and preparation for what happened. And then on the day that it happened, the United States was an actual, critical supplement to Israel's success, both in terms of what our forces did, both in the air and at sea, in taking some of the burden off of Israel and taking down at least a few of these ballistic missiles. And I don't know if it might have been a third to a quarter of the drones that were fired. And then obviously the role that CENTCOM would have played in coordinating a large part of the overall operation, taking all of that intelligence, those data feeds in from around the region and making that accessible to Israel and coordinating the defense and all those planes that would have been in the air and figuring out what the best tools for interception would have been for different targets, helping in that effort, I think was, again, a huge testament to the American military and to the American commitment to Israel and to the strategic partnership. I'll stop there, Arian.
John, another element of the defense that happened is of course the regional partners that worked with the U.S. and Israel. You recently today had a piece in Defense News discussing that partnership. What stood out to you about how U.S. and Israel's regional partners contributed to the defense?
Well, I'm not sure how much we know. I think we're learning a lot, and maybe we'll learn a lot in the weeks and months to come about exactly the kinds of role our Arab partners played. The one country we do know, maybe in some ways the most important country, Jordan, because it's so critical to Israel's strategic depth and interests. And there's obviously been a lot of tensions in the relationship over Gaza and the Palestinian question. And the fact that the Jordanians stood up, put their own planes in the air, I presume, although I don't know for sure, made some of their airspace available to other partners to participate in shoot downs as well. I think that was enormously important and courageous by King Abdullah at a time when the Jordanians and not enough people are paying attention. They're under tremendous stress over what's happening in Gaza. The Iranian pressure on Iran and the pressure of Iran's proxies on Jordan is huge. The efforts to smuggle into the West Bank to make Jordan somehow part of this ring of fire now that they've got virtually most of Jordan's borders covered with Iranian proxies, whether in Syria, in Iraq, in obviously coming up the south from Yemen. Jordan's very vulnerable now, and for the king to have stepped up the way they did and to publicly defend it, say we're all about defending our territory, and if people are shooting things into our territory that shouldn't be there without our permission, we're going to defend our sovereignty. So I think that was incredibly important. The rest of the Arabs, it's unclear to me whether any of them were as active as the Jordanians, but at a minimum, and maybe General Norkin can shed any light on this, although I know it's highly, highly sensitive, and all these states are feeling vulnerable, in particular because of the Gaza conflict and their populations on the street being quite upset. But we know, you and I wrote, our study back last year with our generals on, developing, advancing the U.S. strategy on air and missile defense in a policy report that we produced last spring, in which we already saw at that point in time the kinds of connections being made between our partners in the region, hooking themselves up to CENTCOM's Air Operations Center out of Doha, feeding radar information, sensor information into the KAOC in Doha, where that can get very, very quickly in a matter of a few seconds, less than a few seconds, producing an air domain picture that then, with adequate permissions, can be beamed out to all of CENTCOM's partners who are participating in that effort. So without knowing for sure and having been confirmed, I think at least some of those partners were allowing that information, highly sensitive national defense information, to be made available to the coalition that defeated this Iranian attack on Saturday night. And of course, a lot of those partners, particularly out in Israel's east and CENTCOM, have that geographic advantage or disadvantage, depending on your perspective, of being very close to the Iranians, a lot closer than Israel. So if you're getting all of that information, combining it with what we and the Israelis have at a national level, putting that all together, your ability to identify these attacks from the earliest moments, to track those attacks accurately, to see all the different vectors of the attack, where these swarms are coming from, and then to coordinate the interceptions by an operating coalition is just a tremendous, tremendous advantage. As you and I said in our report with the generals, we're still at very early stages. There's a long way for this to go, but thanks to people like General Norkin and his counterparts across the region over the last several years, we made significant more progress over the last few years than we U.S. officials had made in the previous 20 years, trying to get our Arab partners to work more closely together on air and missile defense. And again, for our Arab partners, I think a lot of the attraction, why they want to be part of this team and get into this club, is because, they knew what Israel was capable of technologically and through operational experience, what it's done through conflict after conflict, particularly with Hamas. And after Saturday night, I can just imagine the appetite of military and air commanders across the Middle East they really want to get some of this secret sauce to figure out how they're going to protect each other. Because again, what we saw on Saturday night, even, compared to what we've seen out of Hamas over the years in those large salvos that they fired, this was just, it seems to me, an order of magnitude more complex, more deadly, more threatening. And to have defeated 99% of that attack, extraordinary.
I completely agree, and want to return to, in a moment, return to maybe some of the things the U.S. can do to advance that integrated air and missile defense architecture, because I think Iran's attack may have done more to encourage the development of that and encourage partners to want to join that than anything else in years. But General Norkin, that cooperation was really facilitated by Israel's inclusion in CENTCOM, which is something that JINSA had been advocating for since, I believe, as early as 2018. So what did Israel's inclusion in CENTCOM, what did that enable in terms of closer coordination in operations as Israel and the United States and regional partners to one degree or another are trying to cooperate to conduct air defense?
Well, first of all, as John described in much better English than me, let's imagine.
Just a little better, not much.
Yeah. Let's imagine that all the nations around us, and I think not just in Middle East, at that day, thought that, okay, what should we do if someone might attack us like this? What might happen if Iran is going to attack each of our neighborhood nation? We all remember that a few years ago, they destroyed Aramco. in Saudi Arabia. And I think that I don't want to do some mistakes, but it was around 15 cruise missiles or drone, 15. And they did.
I think bigger. I think 25, maybe closer to 25.
Okay. Between 15 to 25, let's agree about this number. And the Saudis lost billions of dollars. So now they launch almost 300 UAVs and cruise missiles and 110 ballistic missiles with a very big and massive warhead, much bigger than the warhead that a platform like Shahid can carry, 10 times bigger. So because of that, I think that there is a common interest to learn from each other and to build a regional plan to support each other and to defend our nations. It's not only about technology, it's of course about intelligence, training, method, maintenance, and many other aspects. And to build such a operational capability, it takes years. You cannot build it by a week or 1 month. And as John described, we understood, let's say 6 years ago, that we should do it. And in that opportunity, I would like to appreciate CENTCOM commanders, General McKenzie, which is also part of our team in Jinsan, and General Gui, he was the AFCEN commander at that time. Now he is one of the regional commanders of the American military, I think the North Command. And under his management, under his leadership, he organized this, let's say, regional plan, which we are now with maybe the second or the third phase of this plan, and we can improve it and build much more advanced one with better technology and better capabilities. But I don't want to stay just at the tactical level. We used to say in Israel that air superiority, it's a bridge for regional stability. So by supporting each other and by having air superiority, we are building a better Middle East. And we are building bridges between the nations. And the governments can put other layers of strategic interest over those bridges. Military, defense, and non-defense interest. So it's a regional interest to have regional air defense capabilities. I think it's a part from the American president vision. President Biden just declared, I think a month before the war, that he is looking for a train between India, the Gulf, Israel, and Europe. It's not just a train, it's communication, it's energy, many other opportunities. But we all know that before you are moving forward with all those economic and strategic steps, first of all, you need to secure your nation. You need to defend your citizen. And once all the nations and the leaders in the Middle East look at that specific day, they understand that they must do it.
Thank you. John, returning to, or I should say, building off of what General Norkin was saying and the strategic opportunities, and then building on the comments you made earlier about the Integrated Air and Missile Defense report that we at JINSA published. What can the United States do to push regional air defense cooperation forward to build on this massive demonstration of the possibilities? As you said, it's still at the early stages, but I think there's a lot more U.S. leadership that's needed to move this forward.
Yeah, well, again, this was a great proof of concept for a effort that I think has been gaining momentum. I don't know what the impact of the Gaza war has been on it, whether it's interfered with it at all at a military level with some of our Arab partners or not, the way it has interfered with certain things at a political level. But I think, now is would be the time for the U.S. to really double down on this effort. This is such a great demonstration of how much all of our partners have to gain from deeper cooperation with CENTCOM, from deeper integration with Israel. The possibilities are really almost limitless to, provided that people can reach a level of trust where they are really beginning to, feel comfortable with sharing information in real time, obviously upgrading their systems to ensure that, all the information flows digitally can happen virtually instantaneously to help create this common operating picture for the region that will then be accessible to everybody participating in this system. We entitled our report, Build It and They Will Come, and we're starting to build it. And I can imagine that there are some partners out there saying, wow, this thing might really be something. Let's figure out how we can be part of this effort. So I hope that the president and his team, I know CENTCOM will be working this and have been working this tirelessly. I hope the president and his team also put some real political muscle behind this in any interactions they have with our partners. As we all know, the Biden administration, despite October 7th, is still really hard at work on Saudi-Israeli normalization and hoping beyond hope that they, even with our limited political calendar leading up to our elections in November, that they still may be able to get something big done with the Saudis and Israel, and obviously the Saudis and the United States. But I think the president ought to use what happened on Saturday night and whatever role the Saudis played in it to let the Saudis know that if they're prepared, if the Crown Prince is prepared to take some further risks here, that the advantages for the kingdom are just enormous of this kind of partnership with the United States, with Israel, technologically, militarily, economically, diplomatically, that they have a chance now to do something on behalf of Saudi security, the Crown Prince does, that no previous Saudi leader has had a chance to do in terms of his changing and improving the nature of his strategic relationship with the United States, and obviously gaining access to everything Israel has to offer. So I hope this can become a catalyst for that. Of course, we've all got to see that this is only, I don't know if it's Act 1 or Act 2, but there's still some more acts to come here, I think. We'll all have to see how that plays out. The Iranians, as we saw on October 7th and since, are determined to make sure everything I just talked about doesn't happen, that they foil it because they understand the level of threat this poses to them. Israeli-Saudi normalization, a U.S.-Saudi defense treaty, a truly integrated air and missile defense system in the region that keeps building. So the Iranians, no doubt, have a lot of other tricks up their sleeve because this is really existential for them and for the Islamic Republic. If we're able to get this regional alliance together and really build it out. So we've got some obstacles that we face, some challenging days ahead. But I hoping that the United States takes this significant success of Saturday night and really builds on it, because I think it's a great opportunity.
That's a great segue into some questions on what those Acts 2 and 3 may look like. We have a question in it, and before I get to that, I should remind the audience that you can submit questions through Zoom's Q&A function. I'd be happy to read them to the panel. But we have a question in from John Bottomore. What lessons and conclusions might Iran have drawn about Israel's and allies partners' air defense capabilities and ability to upscale should they consider an even larger attack, possibly from multiple country launch positions? General Norkin, I'll ask that to you.
Well, I think that both sides got a lot of lessons to learn, and the Iranians are not stupid. They're quite clever, and they develop quite advanced platforms and missiles. So I'm sure that they are going to challenge us in the future, and we should work very hard to defend our nations. We shouldn't debrief ourselves just about the bottom line, about the 99%. There are many other issues that we should learn, because if you're, let's say, happy with the 99%, the next time, I'm not sure that we are going to achieve it. So we should prepare ourselves. We should train for even hardest scenarios. And the Iranians are going to build bigger missiles, longer distance, more advanced warhead, more accurate missiles, and many other options. And we should be always in the front. Of course, there are many projects that now the American military, together with the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli industry, with the American industry, they are all working on. And of course, we are looking for the laser technology. Once the laser is going to be part of our operational arsenal, I think it might change the battlefield, but it will take time. So in each of the missions, for each of the people in the Air Force, the controllers, the intelligence, the maintenance, the pilot, the air defense warriors, all of us, high level, low level, we can learn a lot from this very successful operation. And to the military guys in this webinar, we all know that it's much harder to learn from a successful operation.
Yeah.
It's easier to learn once you fail, but once you did such a successful operation, it's much harder, and we should work very hard to learn and not just to sit on the chairs and wait for the next time.
Ari, can I just add a couple of things, a couple of
Absolutely.
thoughts that sort of worry me. I agree with General Norkin that while we ought to celebrate the success, we shouldn't get too deep into patting ourselves on the back, because again, the Iranians have the largest arsenal in the Middle East in terms of its ballistic missile, cruise missile, drones. There's a lot of firepower left, and one, dog that didn't bark, obviously, on Saturday night. In some ways, the most dangerous, even more dangerous than the Iranians, is Hezbollah and that arsenal right across the border from Israel, including, perhaps several hundreds, if not more, precision-guided missiles. Also, lots of them with fairly heavy warheads. Good reasons why Iran didn't expend Hezbollah on Saturday night, and yet, that's always a possibility. And then you're in a dramatically different level of challenge and conflict for Israel and the Israeli home front. So we've really got to think, about Hezbollah and how we deal with that huge threat. Another thing I would say is I worry deeply about the Russians and Chinese. I don't know how they're thinking about this. I can imagine the Russians, are loving the fact since October 7th that everybody's been focused on something else besides Ukraine, and Ukraine has obviously suffered as a result of the world's attention and a lot of resources being diverted to the Middle East rather than to Ukraine. And part of that is obviously political dysfunction here in the United States. But I worry, what could the Russians do? What could the Chinese do? What capabilities might they be prepared to give the Iranians or share with the Iranians, knowing how much help the Iranians have given the Russians on these cruise missiles, knowing that the Iranians, obviously learned lessons from Ukraine about how to use combined attacks like this of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and drones. I worry about that growing nexus between the Russians, Chinese, and Iranians, and what they may be prepared to do for the Iranians, including in the air defense realm. If we suddenly see S-400s going to Iran, that worries me. I do also, there are reports that the Israelis, as good as the early warning intelligence was, that the Israelis didn't, when they struck, or let's say the reports that Israel struck, I'll be very Israeli and say there were media reports that the Israeli struck a couple of IRGC generals on April the 1st. At least some of the reporting we got is that there wasn't a lot of contingency planning for a 300-plus projectile complex attack, of a vast attack on Israel as one of the likely Iranian options. And yet the Iranians did it in the face of a lot of deterrent threats from the United States and Israel and others, and warnings from others. Those all failed. And the Iranians felt, for a variety of reasons, but also maybe too much self-confidence, that they could do this and they could get away with it, even if it meant risking mass casualties in Israel, potentially, and a larger war. And I still worry that we may be missing something about something happening inside of Iran. And we just had some nuclear threats from an IRGC general today about Iran potentially changing its nuclear doctrine, going for a weapon. I worry about that. One of the saving, silver linings of this horrible attack on Saturday night is that it has refocused, at least for the moment, some of the world's attention on this threat from Iran, and in particular on the Iranian nuclear program that no one was talking about on, April the 11th or 12th. But now people are focused on it, in part because there's a thought maybe Israel needs to take the advantage of this opportunity to do the really big thing and go after that nuclear program. But I do worry about what's happening on the Iranian nuclear program. So we got a lot of hard work to do, when none of us should be, just sit back and congratulate ourselves for a great success on Saturday night.
Thank you, General Norkin. I'll open it up for you to comment on any of the points that you're able to comment on that John made, but also, as he mentioned, the Iranian nuclear program and the attention that is getting. There's been a lot of public speculation in recent days about what Israel might do next. So I'm wondering if you could lay out for the audience what the considerations are that Israel is thinking about in terms of how it may respond to this.
Well, I think that this is the worst platform to speak about what Israel what is going to do. But as the IDF Chod already declared that General Levy, that Israeli Defense Forces is going to react. I think that till now, the government, the cabinet, and the military is doing the right thing. They didn't react immediately. And at the same time, they are building or do act to have a better coalition and to share our thoughts, our interests with some of the European nations, of course, with the American government and some of our neighbors. And at the same time, the military is going to bring from day to day a better plan. But my personal perspective is that we should act. We shouldn't act against Iranian citizens. We need to act against military targets. And we should, let's say, present some of the Israeli capabilities, and by that the Iranians might understand that, okay, if Israel do such a very small and precise attack, what might happen if she is going to decide to do it much wider and larger? As a clue. So let's see. We all know that next week it's going to be one of the most important weeks of the Jewish tradition, the Passover holiday. We still got 133 Israelis hostages in Gaza, which is very important. And the cabinet now deal with the challenges, and you need to put some priorities, what to do first. And the military start again to prepare himself to get into Rafah. So it's a very complicated campaign, multi-front, North Front, Eastern Front, Gaza Front, Red Sea, and I think that we should do all our activities just after we think about each of them more than once. And as a final statement, although we achieve a great achievement, and I'm very proud of the men and women of the Air Force, I would like to take this opportunity and to appreciate the American support. The American support to build those capabilities through the last, let's say, 30 years, and the American support to build a regional coalition. And of course, the American support since October 7. And as a pilot, I deeply understand how important the American support for Israel. So I'm proud, I appreciate, and I'm insist to learn from this operation, because the next one might be harder.
Thank you. And John, any final words?
Well, I just, we've seen what American and Israeli cooperation can do. I hope we can stay on that page. I hope there's a lot less public talking about the relationship and a lot more private coordination, discussion, thrashing out of differences. I think, the Americans are going to have to support anything Israel decides to do that it thinks is a matter of its survival and self-defense and deterrence in this region. I don't have a problem with the president, suggesting to the prime minister, let's take a minute, let's reflect, let's figure out how we're going to move forward together in a way that, we're both able to take care of our own national imperatives, but we need to do it together. I object to that public messaging that suggests somehow we're not together and there's differences. And there's just far too much capability for the Iranians and our other enemies to misinterpret that, miscalculate, and do something really bad in terms of overreach that is going to lead us down a path exactly where none of us want to go. And certainly the president doesn't want to go in an election year. But I think, the best way to avoid that is for there to be a presentation to the world, to the region, that the United States and Israel really stand together at this very difficult moment for the West and the civilized world against jihadism and barbarism. And that's the best deterrent of all.
Thank you. Well, we're over time, and we only tangentially covered what we usually talk about in this time slot, which is, of course, Israel's war and the fronts on Gaza and Lebanon. But I want to thank you to the audience, to General Norkin and John Hannah for joining us. You can find all of JINSA's work on our website, jinsa.org. Please check your email inboxes for our next webinar and future publications. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Great. Thank you. All right. Thanks, General.
Bye-bye.
Happy
Thank you.
Pesach.
Bye. Happy Pesach.
Thank you.